Western Cape Premier Alan Winde has rubbished claims by Police Minister Bheki Cele that the province receives a lion's share of policing resources. During a meeting with residents of Mitchell's Plain yesterday, Cele said the Western Cape consumed more than half of the national police budget. However, Winde has refuted these claims, saying the minister's comments are an insult to poor communities in that province. The Western Cape Premier labelled the comments misleading and damaging. Let's take a listen at what the Police Minister had to say exactly.
There are two provinces that take money here. It's KZN for special teams we have put there to deal with the crime and the political killing. It's taking a lot of money on top of the budget of the province. But the next province that is even taking more money than KZN is Western Cape. Almost half of the resources of the country, they come here.
We are joined by Western Cape Premier Alan Winde to find out more about the issue. A very good morning to you, sir. Do you suggest that the Police Minister has misrepresented the truth here?
Absolutely. There is no ways. I mean, we have been fighting for extra resources for years. We have, and specifically if the Minister wants to go to the Cape Flats, and this is under his purview. He is responsible for policy, for making sure that the funding as well as the deployment goes into the areas where crime is at its worst. And quite frankly, if you ask anybody who lives on the Cape Flats here in the Western Cape, what it's like. I mean, this is where the deployment needs to happen. Just go and have a look at the numbers. We should be, on average, about one police officer to every 225 citizens. But if you go to Ravensmead, it's 1 to 895 citizens. On average in this province, it's between 600 and 800 in these crime hotspots. They should be getting the opposite. They should be getting real deployment into these crime hotspot spaces. If you go to Imisamo Yetu in Hout Bay, 1 to 800. If you're in Grassy Park, it's 1 to 800. If you're in Gugulethu, it's 1 to 600. In Khayelitsha, it's 1 to 480. I mean, really is unacceptable for the Minister to come and talk about this. And then we provide the PNP, the Policing Needs and Priorities, to the Minister every single year. He does not address those needs. I mean, if you look at detectives in our region where we're having the shootings, where we're having extortion, these are directly under his control. We have 545 detectives, too few. We've got 142 unfilled posts. The detective cases generally are sitting with a caseload of 200 cases per detective. It should be below 50. It is absolutely, and now look at the gender-based violence. When he talks about gender-based violence and then you have the actual deployment, we've got more than 36,000 cases where we are busy with DNA investigations. That's the backlog to deal with gender-based violence. 67% of detectives haven't even received domestic violence training. I look at the vehicles in the 60 police stations. Of the 1,572 vehicles in 60 of the hotspot stations, 940 of them are not serviceable, are not working properly. There is really no commitment to deployment, and we're sitting at about between 4,000 and 5,000 police officers too few deployed. So number one is the deployment of resources, and then the other one is the deployment of the resources within the framework. It's in his power to make sure that the crime hotspots, specifically where we're seeing gangsterism and shooting and citizens are under threat, they should have far more deployed police officers to citizens ratio than anywhere else, and it's exactly the opposite.
We'll come back to these issues that you have outlined for us in a moment. I'd like to perhaps just get a response in terms of why you would think that he's misrepresenting the truth. That's quite a big statement to make, that a lot of the resources are going towards the Western Cape, half, of them. So why would he lie about that?
Well, I suppose this is the mix between your real commitment to fighting crime and political campaigning. And, of course, I think that there was no doubt that this was a political campaign. We got very, very short notice to say that the minister was coming. In actual fact, at 7 o'clock the previous evening, my office was being contacted to say, can we have this meeting the next morning? We said, you can't give us less than 20 hours, 20 hours notice for a mass meeting in Mitchell's Plain. I mean, they obviously, when I looked at how many chairs were rolled out and the sound systems, etc., it had been planned days in advance. And of course, nothing, it's absolute political ploy. And then when you come and say, I mean, it's evident in a country our size, you can't make the statement that half of all policing resources goes to the Western Cape. We've been fighting for this for years. We've been under-resourced. We've been fighting on this for years, saying that in actual fact, if you really want to get it right, we need to devolve policing powers to provinces. And then he says it's KZN and Western Cape that get the most. Well, quite frankly, we saw very little Bheki Cele's support to KZN just a short while ago during the riots. And of course, we've had the gang violence, the shootings, ongoing shootings in those hotspot areas of the Cape Flats. We need to see the deployment. Years later, we're not seeing any change. That's why we ourselves call for the devolution of power. We're not getting it. So at the same time, we are budgeting, and in our safety plan, we've already put an extra 1,000 boots on the ground for a partnership between the province and the city of Cape Town, deploying to those hotspot areas based on times of crime. But I mean, our 1,000 deployment compared to the 20,000 police officers deployed to the province, it's just a very small sort of drop in the ocean. But these are the areas that we are busy putting in place to try and get the right balance. And when you speak to the police officers, to the station commanders in these hotspots, they are so grateful that this support is coming, but we really need to get that support from a national level, from a management point of view and from a deployment point of view.
Your response to a thought that says, are we not treating the symptom and not addressing the cause here? You speak of very shocking statistics, 1 police officer to 800 citizens. It is World Homelessness Day today. A number of people in the Western Cape do not have adequate housing, leading to social ills. They do not have access to proper transportation. They do not have access to sanitation. And so if we address those issues, do you not believe that perhaps when people have a dignity about the way they live, about the way they are, including being employed, that perhaps could help? I do understand and appreciate your point that perhaps this is a matter of national government, but are your hands tied here? What is it that you can do, to help these already vulnerable people?
Yeah, absolutely. So that if you read our safety plan, the boots on the ground, the policing is one component. And, you've got to get the balance right on the other side. And our safety plan specifically speaks about that. It's about the causalities. So, and that plan talks to the first 1,000 days of a child's life. And if you get that right, you give that child a much better chance of not ending up in gangsterism, of ending up to become employable, etc., etc. Then we look at which is a big thing right now, is the next phase of a child's life, the ECD space. We look at when we move into these crime hotspots, how do we identify boys at risk and get to them early enough so that they can be extracted and given support so that they don't venture into gangsterism and crime and the unemployment and the consequences thereof, that they can actually be helped along the way so that they play a constructive role in society. So our programs like the Project Chrysalis, where young boys at risk get pulled out, get given support. From there, they actually get given opportunities so that there's an economic future and a positive future. And then, of course, critically, as you say, what about the economy and jobs? So as you move in and you start to make it safer, you've got to come in with the economic program so that you can get those jobs. And that is the crux of our safety plan. It's about causalities and understanding those causalities. It is not only about policing. It cannot only be about policing. And of course, as you say, we're under pressure. I mean, our population has grown in the Western Cape by 650,000 citizens in the last 5 years. Many people looking for economic opportunity, looking for housing opportunity, as you say. And of course, we've got to get that balance right, get the safety right so we can get the investments, so we can create the jobs. And of course, that's the cycle. But you are absolutely correct. It cannot just be policing. It's got to be the other support mechanisms into the system.
Thank you very much, Premier Alan Winde. He's the Premier of the Western Cape, for your time this morning.